Got to make an announcement first, though. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report Live, and of course we have Dr. Bob Thiel on the program, and I want to thank all the people that received their emails last night. If you want an updated newsletter, I've started now putting out newsletters on a weekly basis. If you want them more often, we'll do that. We're going to give you a preview of what the shows will be in the next week. We'll give you updated news, special articles. I put a rough draft of the contracted version of the very advanced ebook that's coming out on Fukushima, including the engineering design fixes for the problem, personal protection for the workers there and here in North America in the Northern Hemisphere, and tons of references, including all the emails back and forth over the last 3.5 years with my nuclear expert, Chris Harris, and other nuclear people that have been involved in the project. So we've got lots of sources, actual documents that indicate the design of the reactors, the specific problems involved, and actual solutions rather than just guessing. And we challenge people to go out there, whether they're a nuclear safety expert, a nuclear scientist, or radiation and oncologist, or anybody else who thinks that they're qualified to challenge and improve those ideas. Again, this is the whole idea, is to put an idea out there just like putting out a theory. You know, the idea is to try to knock it down, try to improve it, try to prove the theory is, as they say, the null hypothesis. And we also want to thank all the people that are supporting Nutrimedical on a daily basis, getting all our nutritional needs here at Nutrimedical, because we have a big job to do. We do a lot of things very uniquely, approaching the Christian issues, which we're going to do again this hour with Dr. Bob Thiel, the very best nutraceuticals on the planet. We challenge any other company or any other doctor on this network or elsewhere to challenge them to say they have anything better or better protocols or science behind it or ways of testing to prove that what they're doing is actually efficacious. And I teach in the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, Environmental Medicine, Advancement of Medicine, and I can tell you that I can prove to you that we have the best. And you get free consults. There's no charge. If you go to a functional medicine doctor, the average doctor is going to charge you around $300 an hour just to say hello. We don't charge you zero. If you're a customer, you get free access to phone and email contacts. And even if you're a non-customer, just send an email and I'll respond to you. Even if you're not a customer, you're just a listener or someone who heard a friend of a friend. So we really appreciate that. Our first newsletter just before the big sale coming up. And by the way, we tell people if you want a pre-sale, you can list what you want and you can tell the date when you want your card to be charged so you get the sale price. If you have distress situations like you're a veteran, we always accommodate people who are in distress situations because we want to make sure we're a service to people. And that's why we provide the consultations free. We have, some pretty advanced protocols, but in many cases, the top 2 or 3 things are all you need to get things really rocking and rolling toward wellness, where you can stop a lot of the toxic medicines. I had a consult this morning with a young gentleman who's over 400 pounds, congestive heart failure, hypertension, depression, asthma, and of course he's on a beta blocker, which is contraindicated with asthma because it brings it on. Most of the doctors I call toxic docs don't even read the product inserts or the black box warnings to realize there's medical contraindications to using drugs they use on an everyday basis. Then they avoid things like CoQ10, which are the only thing that are going to improve the heart, or they give drugs that directly interfere with CoQ10 metabolism, like HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors like Lipitor, Zocor, or Crestor. So if you have a toxic doc, try to get a functional medicine doc, and we can help you with that. But you have a functional medicine doc right here, free. All you have to do is contact me, and I will help you get through the maze. And there are some safe drugs. I can tell you which ones to take. And there are ones that are just plain useless, and the other ones that are dangerous as hell, and definitely for your specific indication or health condition are contraindicated. And you can prove it. That's why medical legally, these doctors are really asking for lawsuits when they give combinations of drugs that can cause problems. But to be honest with you, most of them don't care. They're in the gerbil cage trying to get a fee and trying to get so many people through the doors so that they can continue to maintain their office. They don't have time to read all the medical journals, research articles, which are published right in their own journals. So you need to be aware of that. If you're not aware, listen to the program. If you are, let's say, be a skeptic. Ask better questions. If you think that we're full of it, I'll actually send you the medical references to prove to you that we're not. And these are published in medical journals and elsewhere. It's very disturbing what's going on in medicine. It ignores things like glyphosate attached to gliadin, fraction of wheat gluten. And it's wheat gluten that's the big bad guy. Other forms of gluten usually are not so bad at all, especially if they're not exposed to pesticides or genetically modified. Genetically modified food should be banned. We should have proper labeling, which would cause the public to just ban it. We need to get rid of aspartame, Splenda, and artificial sweeteners. And a good part of our problem with obesity would stop if we stopped a lot of the toxic food and mineral-depleted food in our soils, because we basically have a depleted population that can't support enzyme activity or turn on genes to activate gene transcription. And if you don't have the right minerals, you can't possibly do that. So we have a population where we have toxic doctors pushing pills, and they chase pills after pills. It's like the old story, the lady that ate the fly, and then she ate a larger and larger animal to eat the various animals before she knew it, she ate a horse, and of course she died, of course. So you've heard that story before, I'm sure, Dr. Thiel.
Well, the part I was going to just interject on was that as far as this whole genetically modified stuff, years ago I tried to work with the state of California. Consumers Union, the people who put out consumer reports, was backing me from a moral standpoint. They weren't giving me money, but
right.
They basically told me if I get the right bill put up, they would support it. They would get people to do it.
Right.
But nobody would do it because
Jeffrey Smith is getting it done. We have a march against Monsanto in over 56 countries. We have 32 states passing laws that are going to cause labeling. We have 2 states right away. Washington State is going to be doing it in Oregon. And I guess we lost our connection with Dr. Bob, so we'll reconnect. And so these things are going to move forward. And the big GMO companies, we need to sue them. The board needs to go to prison. That's how serious it is, because it's killing people. Countries like Austria would not accept Romani corn because it causes sperm count to drop to 0 and causes birth defects. We know that even China with its 20% of its surface area of its country is so toxic it doesn't support life. There's streams and rivers like the Yangtze River is totally poisoned. And yet they won't accept our GMO corn and wheat. So, Dr. Bob, I guess you got so excited your phone line dropped, but even the Chinese...
Or the powers that be didn't want me to speak, so now I'm back.
Well, they don't want you to support what Deagle is saying, because, you see, they can do one of 2 things. They can either eliminate Deagle, which is not going to happen. I'm healthy as a trout and taking all my nutraceuticals and exercising daily. In fact, I just got off my vibrational platform exercise, doing vigorous exercise here just before the show. And I can tell you that the powers that be are freaked out by a population that still has wisdom of what it was like before the 1960s. And they want to knock them off with Obamacare, with toxic medicine, with poisoned waters, the water poisoned with fluoride, chloride, and all kinds of toxic chemicals. And they like the doctors to continue doing stupid medicine, continue giving polypharmacy to the point where one of my geriatricians said, the definition of a geriatrician in tongue-in-cheek was, I keep subtracting drugs until the patient recognizes me from visit to visit.
That's pretty good, but
yeah, and he had a sense of humor, but he realized that his colleagues were all trying to kill the patient. So, and it really is stupid. And yes, there is a place for some drugs in intensive care. There are some drugs that are safe for blood pressure, but by and large, I would say at least half the drugs are dangerous and inappropriate. Most psychiatric drugs are dangerous as hell and shouldn't be given. We're seeing kids walking around on things like Ritalin and Cylert and Pemoline and so on, and when they get taken off, they become vicious, aggressive criminals. We wonder why, when people are on dissociative anesthetics, they have no compunction to stop killing their family or themselves when they come back from Iraq after doing tours of duty on these drugs. And then we wonder why I call them kill-you-jack drugs. We have problems. Well, they're not antidepressants. They're dissociative anesthetic. It's not you killing the killing. You're watching a video game of a person that sort of looks like you doing it. That's what it is. So, with that little introduction, again, the newsletter went out today. It's going to go weekly. I want your feedback. This is your show. That's why we need more callers calling in. And every hour of the show is available for callers appropriate to the topic we're talking about. 800-259-5791. 800-259-5791, except the first hour Friday, where we're just responding to your calls, your questions, and emails. So when we come back, we got lots to talk about with Dr. Bob after more international travel, and he's got some hot news. Better get your tray tables and your seat backs in your upright position and be ready. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and your questions are welcome at 800-259-5791. Well, let's roll now that we've done a little bit of ranting over the toxic docs and the craziness of genetically modified food, and the insanity of what's going on. Now, tell people, this is optimism. Optimism is exposing the truth, like opening up the top of a large abscess, draining it, cleaning out the dead debris, and getting demarcation zones and starting to suture once the pus is cleared with antipathogenics. Again, we have the only Tesla-activated Nutridyne in the world. There's no other pretenders. I hear it's the Thyroid Shield and other thyroid. In fact, I saw one stupid ad sent to me about potassium iodide, and they had it mixed with selenium. I'm thinking, how stupid. I mean, these things are dangerous and they're toxic, and they know, even the government knows, if you take potassium iodide more than 8 or 10 days, you can easily get toxic to your nerves and your kidneys.
Yeah, you don't want to
eyes.
take potassium iodide. I live near a nuclear power plant. They offered us potassium iodide. We have it. But there's a time to take it, but we have
these naturopaths, by the way, that push this are dummies. Okay, they got to realize this is dumb. I'm a nuclear doctor. Okay, I worked taking care of employees at the Savannah River nuclear plant, the nuclear reactor source of Chicago, and Rocky Flats. And I'm going to tell you, as a member of the nuclear division of ACOM, for God's sake, don't listen to people that think that they're qualified, that don't have any certification as a nuclear occupational physician, period. Just tell them they're not qualified to give advice. And when they tell them they are an expert on thyroid, ask them a real simple question. Do you measure free reverse thyroid hormone along with free T3 and core body temperatures? Because if you don't, high sensitivity TSH means nothing if your RT3 level, reverse thyroid hormone level, is high. And everybody who's pre-diabetic with elevated blood insulin resistance, they all have TRS. There's no such thing as anybody who isn't basically hypothyroid that's pre-diabetic. It just is. And everybody who's also hypothyroid also has strain on their adrenals, so their adrenals aren't functioning normal. Neither is their releasing growth hormone.
Almost all the time.
It's always secondary. There's two horses pulling the plow, and the same with their male and female hormones. If they're marginally normal, it's only because they're compensating. And as soon as you start getting insulin resistance down, we have the new product, Leptin Metabolic, the first in the world. There's no other comparison to it. Along with our diabetoline, biotin plus, and our minerals plus, we can reverse the insulin resistance, especially now with the Leptin Metabolic and diabetoline, proven in head-to-head studies. And you've got to fix this metabolically. It's not, obesity and diabetes are not just a forkicide disorder where you're sticking the fork in your mouth too often. It's not just an exercise disorder, although we see people that are exercising and dieting and they still can't lose weight. It's because they got elevated blood insulin resistance. And the problem is there's a lot of unqualified people, even with certifications up their armpit, and they do not know what the heck they're doing because they haven't been at it as long as us. I've been at this for a third of a century. I originated the test brought in for Germany for a reverse thyroid hormone, talked about to the Department of Psychiatry 34 years ago, along with the head of pathology I was working with, on these studies on reverse thyroid hormone and insulin resistance 5 years before Dr. Ravens at Stanford. So before he published his studies on Syndrome X, we didn't publish because I got persecuted after we finished our research with the head of pathology and was threatened that the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta was so angry that I discovered diabetics of high insulin, they threatened to sanction me or pull my license just for the idea of testing bloods. That gives you an idea just how damn stupid the colleges of physicians are and the state medical board. They are knuckleheads of the nth order. And I really don't have respect for doctors who aren't scientists. To me, a scientist is someone who asks questions, asks for validation, asks tough questions, and then continues to do research to try to improve care. But I don't see that. I don't see the art or science of medicine. I see pinheads in Washington, D.C. now with Health and Human Services deciding how things are done. And I see doctors afraid like gerbils that they have to follow the billing codes, or and their offices closed because they don't have enough fee codes to pay to make their staff get paid. And many of these offices don't even have staff that have health insurance because they can't afford it. I mean, that's how insane our system in America is. It's the most dumb system I've ever seen anywhere. It's crazy. And it's not much better in Canada or elsewhere, because socialist countries that have fee codes aren't much better. They're telling the doctor what to do. They're right from medical school on down, the drug companies telling the doctor, don't think out of problems. In fact, as I've said tongue-in-cheek, they did a study at the University of Chicago, which is the largest medical school in America, and the University of McGill, 25 plus years ago, and they found that there was an 8-point drop on IQ going through medical school from beginning to end. And that's equivalent to 2 head injuries where you get 24 hours of retrograde amnesia. So if you think medical school is good for your brain, sorry, it's equivalent to 2 major hits if you're playing hockey where you end up with such a hard bonk on the head that you get cerebral edema and drop 4 points in IQ and retrograde amnesia. You can't remember anything ever for the previous 24 hours. That's how serious it is. Okay? So, yeah, if you think the Dr. Deagle is full of it, just, I'm sure Dr. I gotta laugh at this. It's so crazy. Yeah, I can throw so much research at you. It's like a fire hose. And even no matter what specialty, cardiology, blah, 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 pull all the cardiology journals. Internal medicine, pediatrics, gynecology, surgery, you name it, Dr. Deagle can pull the literature. It is so disgusting. As I say, if I ever get tired of doing radio, I just go back and get a law degree and just nail doctors' carcasses to the wall. Just like, I'm a big game hunter. Stick their heads in the wall and, maybe get a plaster of Paris version of their head as they're shocked that they're finally getting prosecuted. It'd be funny. What do you think, Dr. Bob?
I think that the medical profession and the politicians, if they would tell the truth, everybody would be better off. But unfortunately, I don't see them doing that in this age.
It's what's called the state of insane gutlessness. That's one thing that I and my distant ancestor cousin William Wallace, the leaders of the Maronite Christians that stopped the Muslims through the Shuf Mountains, the Scots that fought in the wars, including World War I and World War II, etc., and they're part of my family. I can tell you I'm a warrior on every side, and I don't have a reverse gear. And when people think, the demise of Dr. Deagle, no, sir. God's going to keep me on this earth for a long time to come, and I'm going to cause considerably more havoc. More havoc in every realm, whether it's geopolitical, health-wise, etc., and exposing genetically modified foods. I have a federal lawsuit that's going to be involved there, and we're going to bring on Jeffrey Smith talking about GMO foods. We will do everything to bring down this system and to replace it with something that's godly. And we're talking about godly government. We don't want no government. We want godly government. We want a godly healthcare system that puts people first. Patients first. That's what we do. So let's get talking about the Pope and all the other stuff. I get off on these tangents, but it's so activating to start connecting the dots and realizing the spiritual issues and the other issues aren't separate. When you have ungodly doctors, they're not going to do the right thing because they're frightened. They're fearful.
And we're getting to the point where they don't understand, the purpose of their profession is to relieve suffering.
Right.
Not through pharmaceuticals, not to just comply with some new government regulation or whatever their association thinks they should be saying.
Or to relieve their bank account from any distress.
No, it shouldn't be about that either, of course.
No. It should be to, as I say, when you leave this mortal coil so many decades hence, it should be well done, good and faithful. So come back and let's get into the intro. We have 2 ways to go here. Let's do the one with, I think the German one is the most shocking. This
all right. Okay, well, I just flew back off of Air Berlin, by the way, of all places, Sunday, back to the United States.
Berliner. That was the statement of Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
I am a Berliner.
Right, everybody's a Berliner, according to him. Well, now what they're going to do over there is to make it even more so everybody's a Berliner, if you will, except doesn't count people like you and I. Basically, they want, over in Berlin, they announced a few weeks ago, they want to build a $6 million building. It's basically for Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and Jews to pray under the same roof. It's in a place called St. Peter's Square, which is over in Berlin. And it's part of this interfaith dialogue that they've been trying to get everybody to come back together. Now, of course, a few weeks ago on June 8th, over at Vatican City, Shimon Peres, the president of Israel, and Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, and the Pope all got to, and there was a Lutheran leader there, and Eastern Orthodox head was there as well. And they all got together and they prayed for their version of peace, or that they're all going to come together. Right. And you also had, about a month or so before that, the head of the Secretary General of the United Nations was plugging the same thing and pushing the Pope's agenda along that line. But that's not all that's been going on. So we've got this interfaith thing going on. Now, any listeners who believe they're Christians the Bible says there's only one name under heaven by which you can be saved. That's in Acts chapter 4. And in verse 10, it tells you that the name is Jesus. It's Acts 4:12 that says the other.
Right.
And so people don't seem to realize that that means that, people aren't all the same, okay? That Muslims are not Christian, Jews are not Christian, Buddhists are not Christian, et cetera, but they seem like they want to act like everybody is, and that's the case. But they've been working on pulling all this together, one piece at a time. On the other hand, back in the days of the Romans, they would keep people satisfied with bread and circuses, I think was the expression. I'm over in Germany, and we were downtown in Dusseldorf, and about 5 in the evening, all of a sudden I see young people showing up. Now, some people may not think these are young people, but let's say they're in the 20 to 30 range in terms of age. And just descending on the town, and what they were doing, they're all there to watch the World Cup.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they get the beer, watch the World Cup, and people seem to be satisfied with that, not realizing that this whole ecumenical stuff is going on in the background.
Right.
Now, on another part, though, people might say, okay, well, we can see through all that. Well, then how about something happened on Saturday? And Pope Francis kind of went off script a little bit, and he blasted the mafia as the adoration of evil, and he declared that the mafia was excommunicated. Now, I read another article about this. It says he couldn't officially excommunicate them the way he did it. You can't excommunicate an organization and blah, 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 blah.
Right, yeah. It has to be individuals. Yeah. Excommunication is a specific spiritual thing, and it's a procedure against an individual always.
Right. So, and so some commentator, news analyst said that. And another one said that, the Pope is risking his life by doing this. They interviewed somebody about this, and he said, he actually used the word godfathers, and by that, he's not referring to the Catholic godfather or godparent that is involved in their infant baptism ceremony. This is an interview from an Italian source, and this person who actually did the interview is actually under police protection from the mafia. Anyway, he says if the godfathers can find a way to stop him, they'll seriously consider it. So we've got the Pope going out there. He's on a positive note. He has taken some steps that the mafia doesn't like. You and I, during one of the breaks, were talking about what's going on at the Vatican Bank, and many people are unaware of this, but the Vatican Bank was considered to be probably one of the premier money laundering banks in terms of the mafia type money.
Mafia? That term keeps on recurring. So in other words, the Pope is just dissing the mafia, but they actually laundered money for them? How about they come clean on the fact that
I think they've taken steps actually to stop doing that. Okay.
Well, that's good. It'd be better to actually just come clean, coming totally clean on the fact that there's all kinds of horrifying things. I don't even want to get into how horrifying, not only with the child sexual abuse and so on that's rampant without the church. Why don't they allow priests to get married and clean the rat's nest out of all the homosexuality in the church? And that would be a good start, instead of trying to distract it by saying we're going to diss the mafia. The mafia must be laughing, thinking, now we got respect to the Pope. I'm sure it's good for business.
Some people are claiming that when the Pope did this, he was actually dissing the Catholic priests who take money from the mafia and who support the mafia.
Really?
Yes. I went through a bunch of articles on it this morning, and several sources said it wasn't just the mafia he was after. He's actually after corrupt priests, and I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But when you hear the Pope go out and talk against the mafia, I mean, you say, okay, well, it's a criminal organization. He should stand up against that, and that's good. And he's being brave because his life is probably at risk for doing so.
Right.
That being said, there's a couple of scriptures that I'm going to allude to. One, Jesus said in Matthew 7:15, he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. As well as in Revelation 13, verse 11, there's this beast coming up. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. You say, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, biblical and even some Catholic commentators have suggested that this could have to do with some type of a pope in the future.
Right.
And somebody last night sent me an article from the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company.
Right.
And I'd like to read the first sentence here and see what I want your listeners to think about this. Right. And again, I didn't write this. This comes from the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company.
Right.
Quote, "Those who think Pope Francis is just a nice old fella in white who'll spend his pontificate kissing babies and blessing the faithful had better give their heads a shake. Popes have the power to shape our world, and Francis is already at it. This savvy Jesuit is also well aware of his political clout."
Right.
And so I thought that was interesting because someone's saying the same kind of stuff that I've said on your show in the past, which is, yes, it's nice. The Bible talks about blessed are the peacemakers, and Matthew 5:9, Jesus said that. But he also warned about just because they look peaceful, maybe they're not.
Well, they may also, you have to learn how to spell the word peaceful. If you spell it P-E-A-C-E, it's a different thing, but if it's P-I-E-C-E, you got the right, you kind of in the right ballpark. Pieces of people, pieces of nations, pieces of a world that's broken. Pieces of religion where dogma doesn't matter. In fact, dogma schmogma, we don't care. We'll follow the dogma of the Greek Orthodox, the Muslims. They're diametric opposite. If you read the shuras of the Quran, it's obscene. It's not nice. Okay? Just like if you read Sabbatean Jewish things from the Talmud of Babylon, it's like horrendous. You know, it's like reading like the Book of the Dead, you know, or some kind of ghoulish, document of some kind of, killer cult. Why do people think that he can have? Welcome back, and Dr. Bob, let's talk about the Muslim issues. What's going on in Iraq right now with ISIS? One of the latest things we talked about this in the last few days was that the Muslims have actually made a statement of what's called sexual jihad, that you have to turn over your young unmarried females to the Muslim ISIS people as part of a sexual jihad in Iraq. I mean, this is the kind of craziness that they deal with over there. And in the West, we're like aghast. We just can't believe this. Yet this Pope is negotiating with Islam, and I don't believe there's such a thing as moderate Islam. Firstly, if they're moderate, why aren't they speaking against the extreme elements that are wreaking havoc in the world? I mean, if you want to talk about terrorism, is there any chance that any other group other than Islam would be blowing up aircraft or causing manpads to take down aircraft with surface-to-air missiles, or wreaking havoc anywhere in any city with micronukes or anything else? That's what it is.
Yeah, well, so I firmly believe that biblical prophecy supports the idea of terrorists coming from the predominantly Islamic nations, and that's something that we're going to see. How
about only the Islamic nations? Period. It's the end of the sentence. There's no other sentences. There's no Buddhists or atheists or agnostics.
Well, sometimes rebels in different parts of the world that are not Islamic
they're just local rabble. They're gangs, like in a certain part of Africa. And if we wanted to drop in special forces or use our advanced dramatic, ground-based robots and drones, we could clean up the rat's nest easy, just like the drug cartels in Mexico and Central America. We could go in there and clean those rat's nests so quick. The problem is we launder their money. The fourth richest man in the world is Mexican, and we launder his money that's legal in America. It's crazy.
Well, getting back to ISIS, et cetera, what they want to do is they want to form an Islamic caliphate. And what a lot of people don't realize is what the Islamists really want. I mean, and they've been very clear. Kind of reminds me, and I mentioned this during the break, Adolf Hitler rose up. People didn't believe he wanted a piece of this, piece of that. But if they read his writings, he said exactly what he wanted.
Mein Kampf. I mean, actually his pillow rested on top of Mein Kampf, I think, at night. So it could perforate through the side of his head. I mean, anybody that wants to be a dictator now, read Mein Kampf, and it tells you exactly how to lay out your dictatorship.
Well, so you've got groups like the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood that they say they want a caliphate running from Spain over to Indonesia, which means they want a piece of whatever they can get. And when you look through all this, though, what's kind of interesting is, how is this going to line up with biblical prophecy? You've got Catholic prophecy that says that the Muslims are going to become Catholic. You've got Islamic prophecy that basically says they're going to knock off the Catholics. But then, of course, we've got the Bible, which is what I want to talk about now. When we look at the Bible, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 4 and 8, we find out that all the world is going to worship this final beast power. And you say, well, wait a second, how are the Muslims going to do this, or other ones? And we've talked about this on your show in the past. But basically, when you read 2 Thessalonians 2, it talks about signs and lying wonders that are going to appear. And I've wondered, based on biblical research such as the Lady of the Kingdoms, the so-called virgin in Isaiah 47, who's called a harlot in Revelation 18, if perhaps some type of Marian apparition is going to be made public, and that this would temporarily get the Muslims to support it. Now, I've been to Turkey 3 or 4 times, and near Ephesus in Turkey, they actually have a celebration every year for Mary. And it's not a Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, it's a Muslim celebration. Because Mary, according to Islam, is one of the 4 perfect women, and they have this big deal for her. And so when I look at all this, I keep wondering if what we'll see is we're going to see some kind of a deal between probably the Catholics and the Muslims. I suspect that's going to happen. We will most likely see some type of apparition or we will see some kind of sign or lying wonder, and it may be an apparition, including one, and that the Muslims will temporarily be mesmerized, if I could use that word, by all this and temporarily worship the beast power. However, when I continue to read through Scripture, I see that they're going to rebel and fight. So I don't think the Muslims forever will worship the beast. I think they're going to wake up and say, wait a second, the beast power, these are crusaders, we don't like them. And I read that in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 43. So what's going on now is we're seeing these Islamic groups trying to set up a caliphate, which is consistent with what the Bible warns about in Daniel 11, 40 through 43, which I just mentioned, as well as Ezekiel 30, verses 1 through 8. We're seeing bits and pieces. It's not all together yet. And I can see people like the United States going in there and saying, hey, maybe if all these Arabs will cooperate, these Islamic nations will cooperate, maybe this will reduce terrorism, and maybe we'll have peace and safety. And as
I can see that temporarily. In fact, I would
temporarily.
Say temporarily. And the first thing is that right now, the things that got both Saddam Hussein shoved with a steel rod up inside him and killed by a horrible death, which caused the witch of Hitlery rotten Clinton to cackle like the witch of the West. And we had the destruction of Muammar Gaddafi, all these people. What we have, Muammar Gaddafi is a guy that was shoved with the steel rod, and Hillary cackled, so I get my dictators mixed up. Yeah. And Saddam Hussein hanged, of course, which is the wrong Saddam Hussein because he had crooked teeth, he was 3 inches shorter. Even his wife walked out of the room and said, that's not Saddam, that's one of his doubles. Because he had doubles that he had around the country. 3 or 4 inches taller, straight teeth, different gait, etc., much different look. And his wife just walked out. She said, that's not Saddam. And she just was so frustrated that people were going to hang this double, and he went right to the end because the guy died, I guess he was a double to the end. What I see happening is that I think you're going to start seeing the Muslim countries, break with that at some point. But the other, they want a deal. They all died because they're trying to set up a gold standard and oil bourse, and they want to break away from the European banking system. And that's what got them killed. You can do lots of things. You can have weapons of mass destruction, which, by the way, they really didn't have any. Or if they had no intention to use them because they knew they would use nukes. With Saddam Hussein, which is why, even though we had advanced biological weapons, because I saw the actual FedEx delivery slip of them that we'd sent to him, there was no intention of ever using them. The fact is that they want to make a deal just like the Russians and Chinese. They want to have customers to sell their junk to from China. Otherwise, their factories shut down. They've got tons of warehouses, hundreds and hundreds of them, storing stuff they can't even ship in containers to America because people can't buy it anymore. The economy slowed down. They're manufacturing so fast just to keep the engines rolling. And they even have factories that only run 3-4 days a week. So we have a system that is way out of balance, way bloated, and the Russians and Chinese want to make deals, and the same with the Muslims. The Muslims have got basically a single oil-based economy. They don't have diversification across the Middle East. You go to Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Qatar, and you get a bunch of rich sheikhs running on oil, and there's no such thing as a microchip industry or a car industry or any other major industries. It's all just oil. And, oil is one thing in energy, but the thing is America, once it comes with the Liberty rig on and the rig in the next 6 months, it's got more oil in the Prudhoe Bay area than the rest of the world put together. America was just hydrofracks and pumps oil out of old oil wells that have refilled. I already talked to oil engineers back 20 years ago because I took care of senior engineers from Petro-Canada back in Calgary 30-some years ago, and I knew about this, that all these old oil wells replenish themselves. So we have so much oil here, we don't need a drop of oil from anywhere else in the world. We could just say, you Muslims, you Arabs, we don't need your oil. Leave it in the ground. Have a nice day. And that's the end of it. We don't need Venezuelan oil. We don't need Middle Eastern oil. We don't need any of it. And we also have fusion technology, so they have it hidden in Warehouse 13. They don't want us to know that we have limitless energy. This would put an end to all of this game playing. Interesting.
The whole energy thing could be resolved. In the U.S., there's so much that we could do economically to cut the debt and do the rest, but
it's the bankers that are messing us up.
Route.
It's the bankers doing this to us. And so ultimately, the Pope's trying to do his dance to try to bring all of them together. And as they say, Ich bin ein Berliner. No, we're not Berliners, and we're not going to go and worship in one roof all their different gods. Pick Odin, pick some demigod, pick some God knows what, transhumanist, super high-tech god for Ray Kurzweil. God knows. If it wasn't so horrifying, it would be funny, but it's not really funny.
No, it's
just shocking. It's horrifying. It's like, oh my gosh. And as part of it, they want authentication world currency called the Mark of the Beast that they're testing in Britain this week, literally. Testing to see if they can try it on the Brits first to see if they'll go for a cashless society.